I think it really develops you the cultural understanding, how people think, behave. It's just mind expanding. Like, it's different. Like, wow, these people think differently to me. I need to understand it and then take good value from it. So I think that's what's helped as you embrace these different cultures.
But I love the culture because the idea was fail forward. So they already had failure in their equation, not because they wanted to fail on purpose. They wanted to avoid failure, but for them is I better fail fast so that my cost of the failure is minimum, so I can pivot and gain success much faster. And it's like, that's the way you should live life. Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders in Tech, where we're shining the light with technologists that are actually leading their companies to a better place. Today we have with us Paul Hurd. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Great to spend some time with you.
Fantastic. Paul, for the audience, can you tell me your full name, whether I misspelled your name or not, and where do you live, and what do you do for a living?
I am Paul Hurd. I'm the CIO at Mimecast. We're a cybersecurity company specializing in the collaboration space, so email, Slack, Teams, for example. I live in Colorado.
Colorado. Is that the same state where you were born, or you moved there?
If you haven't worked out from my accent, I was born in England. And I lived and worked there for a while, and then moved to originally Detroit in 2005.
And never looked back.
Never looked back. Yeah, I stayed in Detroit for a few years, spent some time in Texas, and then a couple of years ago I moved to Colorado.
That's fantastic. Paul, so you guys secure the lines in these applications. Like, what exactly does your product do?
Yeah, good question. So our product started focused around emails. So we do a lot of protection. We still see, like 90% of threats arrive in companies through email. So that's our primary product. And we protect inbound emails so that we investigate them for carrying payloads, for maybe having incorrect information, or maybe being a fraudulent email. So it pretends to be from somebody, but it actually isn't. So all that kind of email threat we protect. We've added a number of additional products in there so we can protect brands and other capabilities. But more recently, we started to also protect Slack and Teams and OneDrive. So expanding our capabilities. The company's particularly focused around human risk. So if you look at the biggest challenge to any organization, it's always the person who hits the keys. Because if they don't do something, pretty much you can always protect the company. The technology is good enough that without a person helping in some regard, you've always got protection. And so our focus is around understanding people that have higher risk. Admins, for example, have a lot of access, so they are higher risk individuals. Or people that just don't have good behavior. So if you do phishing simulations, for example, and people regularly fail, we'll put them in a higher category of protection because clearly they're not giving the best practices and the processes you expect an individual to take. So we take extra precautions.
That is amazing. So it's actually geared towards the risk analysis of the actual individual.
Yes, yeah, and we also provide training. So in the past, we've all done it. Your annual compliance security training, you sit there for 90 minutes with this crazy stuff. So we don't take that approach. We have much shorter training, and we're working towards having risk-based training. So if you fail a phishing simulation, we can put up some reminders, some training at the time that you fail. Heaven forbid you fail a real live phishing attack, but we can then provide training to you kind of real time. If, of course, you pass all of those, you don't need the training. Why do we waste your time?
That's amazing. I didn't know that email was so high still. 90% of the hacks come from email still.
Yeah, it's still email. That is the biggest source of threat that causes companies to have bad things happen to them.
Amazing. Back in 2003, I was leading a development group in a large laboratory company. I was employed there, and I remember my counterpart asked for budget to install antiviruses on machines. Like email. We really started using email in 1997 or something like that. So it wasn't that much after email was invented and popularized. And the executive team said, no, it's a silly investment, and why will we? And so they didn't approve the budget. About 7 months later, there was an email that had a virus on it and an attachment. And the virus spread. I think it was code red or one of those nasty emails.
Yep.
They did long story short, we had 90% of the company was down. This thing got infected all the way down to the servers. The cleanup and the loss of business was about 10 times the amount of money they were going to invest in the antivirus that would have caught it.
This podcast is brought to you by ISU Corp. Are you having trouble with your software projects? Is there a project that's taking too long or a technology you can't handle? We can help. We are ISU Corp, experts in custom software since 2005. With almost 20 years of experience, we can solve any technical problem from new businesses to satellite software. We've done it all. Let us turn your ideas into reality. Learn more about how we can help by visiting us at www.isucorp.ca. Your solution starts here.
Yeah, I would have caught it. And nowadays, I think the equation is actually worse, because a lot of the actors are demanding funding to kind of unlock you, and so you end up going to cyber currency to give them money that can't be traced, and so it gets very, very expensive if you decide to pay them, and if you don't pay them, then the recovery is actually pretty complicated. I think one of the things I like about this industry is that there is a competing industry. The bad guys, they are investing heavily. They're currently making plenty of money. So their technology is consistently advancing, which means that companies need protection like we provide, and we have to keep investing and keeping up or beating the bad guys. The latest innovation, obviously, everybody's talking about is AI. Bad guys love it. It helps them write better emails that people will think are real emails. The good guys love it too. So we're spending a lot of money including AI into our product because it helps us analyze emails more effectively and determine good versus bad emails. Ultimately, it's an industry that's growing, and it's a lot of investment in, which is, of course, attractive for a CIO to be a place to work.
Yeah, and you're guaranteed that you will never run out of work, for sure, because they just keep innovating, right?
Well, we have to keep out innovating the bad guys.
That's amazing, Paul. So to get here, Paul, it must have been a lifetime of achievements in order to be able to be at the top of this company in the technology side. Tell me, how did you get going? Let's look back in time. I want to know, where were you the year before you started university, and what did you do after that?
Oh gosh, you want to go back a long way. The year before I started university, obviously I was in England at school, studying what the English call A-levels. So that is the exam you take when you're 18. And I had actually, I'm fairly old. And so at the time, there was no mainstream computing as an option in my school. And so one of the things I did is I actually did that as an extracurricular activity. I took my exams in computer science, and that really was the foundation of my interest, lifelong interest in technology and a career in IT. I loved it. The thought of, just even at those very basic days, like I learned BASIC, Fortran, and COBOL, and some of the very old-fashioned languages. But the thought of what you could do with technology and the potential for the future, it started me then. It still excites me today.
Isn't that amazing? So you come from my generation. The first thing that I ever did in a computer was write a graphic-based little animation using a program called Logos on a Commodore 64. That was, yep. I was in high school when I did that, and I just fell in love with it.
Yeah, the same. I think Commodore PET was the first machine I ever got my hands on. And at school, we used to have to use a mainframe at the state level. And so we used to submit, believe it or not, coding sheets. We hand wrote coding sheets, and we submitted them to get into the mainframe and get, the more powerful computing from the mainframe.
I know, it's amazing. Remember, you did RPG, right?
I didn't know.
No, you didn't. Okay, so RPG, to write the code on RPG, you had these sheets that had all these columns and all these rows, and you had to actually manually write the code there to make sure it was exact, so that you can just retype it in the computer and hopefully it will compile.
Yep, a very similar process. And then you look at today where you've got Copilot helping you to build it. The productivity improvements are so dramatic. At university, I actually studied Lisp, which I'm not sure it even exists anymore, but it was at the time more of an artificial intelligence language, but it's basically built around brackets. Like brackets was the whole thing with Lisp. And you spend forever like, I've misbalanced a bracket and therefore I didn't get the result that I wanted. And you do it all manually. Whereas today, like you can't imagine like counting brackets as part of your programming skills.
So did you take the route of programming or networking or both? Like what did you do in university? Like what did you like most about computer science?
So to be transparent, my university didn't offer a full-time computing program. So I actually studied math, and then I did some computing courses as I was there. So Lisp was as an example. So I came out with a math degree, and then when I started work, I started as a programmer. So that was my first initiative. I actually programmed CA Datacom, and Ideal was the programming language in my very first job.
I remember Ideal.
Yeah, it was actually a good language. For those days, it was pretty efficient to write. So that was what I started with, and then I moved into systems management. I actually ran a fully automated warehouse. I ran all the systems for that. We had automatic guided vehicles around the factory that would deliver parts. I had a fully automated parts store where I was programming the tools that, if you needed a part for the factory, it would go into the warehouse, pull it down, drop it onto the automatic guided vehicle and deliver it to the workstation in the factory.
How long was this ago?
Oh, it was quite a while ago.
And it was already so you were working with PCLs already and
yeah, it was. I mean, that was one of the reasons I joined the company. The company was called Mars, so it primarily makes candy, but it does a number of other things. And they were very innovative, I think, for their time. They invested very heavily in individuals when you join them. So I did a lot of management training and growth exercises. But yeah, they invested in technology, which was why you wanted to be there. Like technology was the way forward.
That is amazing, to know that this automation was there, because when I started researching how Amazon warehouses operate, it's just astonishing to see all the automation happening, right?
Yeah, so this was some years before that, but it's very similar. And one of the key learnings I got, we were looking at robotics at the time, so how to use robots on the production line. And we started trying to use robots to automate what was happening on the production line without doing business process or engineering process reengineering. It was a total disaster. It was just too complicated, because the way that humans operated was not necessarily the most efficient way of building circuit boards and things like that we were building. And so we quickly learned that actually you need to do a full process redesign before you do the automation. And that's a lesson that I've learned from my entire career. If you take whatever you do today, even if it's partly computerized and then you try to do it with a better system, if you don't completely look at the processes, simplify them and make them fit the tool that you're using, in my case, it was a robot, you're not going to be successful. And that is a lesson I think everybody in the IT world has to take on board.
You're right, Paul. You know, in Canada, we have this program called SR&D. I think in England, you have the same thing too, where the government gives you some of your expenses back if you do innovation technology advancement. And my main company, what it does is we just do a custom software solution. So we get hired by other companies to build their software infrastructure. But I've been doing this for 19 years. So back in 2019, 2020, I had the idea. End of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, we're always starting from scratch. We're
Yep.
always starting from scratch, and 40% of that code is the same. Why? So and one of the reasons why was because some clients had preferences. You may want this specific language, or you may want to do a different platform. You may want to host on Amazon, or you want to do Azure if you are on a Microsoft stack. And that's why we did it that way. And also, we couldn't share the code because we were writing IP for the specific client. It was an RP. So I got together my best architects and engineers, and I told them, okay, listen, guys, I want you to build a platform where I can write this 40% of the code. It becomes our intellectual property, but it has to be server agnostic, and it has to be very flexible so that our clients could actually buy a license from us, save them like 70% of the time and cost for that code, but they can still maintain it themselves. And what they told me is this is impossible, because they were thinking with the old process mindset, the old mentality. I told them, no, you have to your point, right? You have to start from scratch.
Yes.
Imagine that you're starting up this business and we're building this, I'm going to call it the core. Now it's there. We keep increasing it, every year we started to add AI and stuff. Like, as technology grows, we keep adding and our clients keep getting more and more results, but it requires a total re-engineer. And we actually were able to do it. Now you can, if you buy the core, you can serve it anywhere you want. Any server will actually, it doesn't matter if it's IIS or Apache, or you want Windows or you want Linux. It's just completely agnostic on the server side.
That sounds fantastic, because the times you get locked in and then the technology suddenly is no longer current or supported, like that's happened a number of times to me, and the ability to switch out is great. So I think you've got a good route there.
Right. So what you say is completely true. And sometimes the business case, the business people with the investment money don't see it, because they think it's going to be a disaster. If this is already working, why would you have to reinvent it? But when you see the cost benefit analysis, you can, if you show them the ROI, they will actually invest the money to do a complete process for engineering, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to give them that longer term perspective. We worked for a few years. We've been through some good and bad times, but you learn from history. And I think that's what you try to bring to your own team, but also the business. Like, how do we plan this? Maybe we have to put a little bit more effort in than just the fastest, quickest win. But then 5 or 10 years time, that product is still viable. It can be supported. It's still giving value to the business.
It's amazing. Paul, when was the first time in your career as a technologist that you thought, I want to become a leader?
It was a few years in, actually. So like I actually love programming. I taught the advanced programming class for the company. So yeah, I liked the technology. I mastered it. I was good at it. And then I got into just roles where you got more junior people coming on board and helping them to learn and get up to speed and not make the same mistakes that I'd made. I just enjoyed that. And I think gradually over my career, I've become much more fascinated by people, how to motivate them, how to get them to be successful. Technology is still important, but I don't program anymore. I have no desire to do that. So it was just a gradual shift that really actually that's much more mentally interesting and gives you more reward. Like you build a good program, okay, you feel great. You have a team of people that really are happy and providing great value to the business. That's more rewarding.
Yeah, Paul, and this is the key for guys that maybe are experiencing the desire to become leaders in technology. A big part of this podcast is for them. Like they are maybe thinking it's time for me to step up and become a leader. Mm-hmm. For me, it was very hard. I was in love with coding since I was 16 years old. But then when I started my own business in 2005, I kept doing the architecture work, some of the code, because it was a very tiny company. But as the company grew, my mentors kept telling me, you have to stop coding and focus on the business only. And I'm like, no, because the satisfaction that I get is amazing, right? Or when you see your software being used by the end user and they come back and tell you, thank you so much, you don't know how much time you're saving. That's amazing, right? So finally, I think it was in 2011. Imagine, in 2011, one of my mentors told me, if you don't stop coding, I will never teach you anything anymore. So I am like, okay. So I removed my compiler and just trusted. And that it was also a trust issue because I was such a narcissist that I thought that my code was the best code in the world and nobody could do as good as I was, even though I already had like 50 developers in my company, right? So once I finally let go and I realized that I need to hire smarter people than me, everything got better. And then I was able to really focus on leadership, which I was actually really good at to begin with. But it was that piece of myself that I want to let go,
I think some people like it and some people don't. And so like if we were talking to people thinking about management, I think there's a really big question. Are you going to be happier doing that than this? Mm-hmm. I've seen, like you and I, great examples. I'm much happier than I was programming, managing people and helping the company move forward. But I've seen other people that actually that is not a place of happiness. And I would definitely not say it's easier. I actually think it's harder to manage people than it is to manage computers. For me, it's much more rewarding, but it's more difficult. It's more challenging. And I'd encourage people to make sure they're really comfortable. What gives them their own feedback and motivation and happiness? If that they can envisage that managing people, great. It can be a very rewarding career. If not, I think they need to be a little careful. Like maybe they don't want to jump in too fast and something that actually they don't enjoy. I've seen that happen to people before.
For sure, and it's also it depends on the person, because I remember like we also had a guy. He was 60 years old, still coding, and he loved it. Yeah. I said, as long as you give me a compiler, I'm happy. I have zero interest in becoming a leader, and he was great, and he retired coding.
I think age is not the barrier to innovation. So if you have a passionate developer, they're 55 or 65, if they're passionate, they still will be innovative, they're creative, they embrace new ideas. That's fantastic. There's no need to kind of force them to do something different. If they're not passionate, they won't be very good. You don't want them.
Exactly. Paul, what advice would you give us to somebody that is in that transition? What steps they need to take because they feel like leadership is calling them, but they don't know what to do because they're too afraid that they might not succeed leading other people?
A couple of thoughts. One is my experience was step by step. So I wasn't like suddenly a manager and I had a team and, it was my first experience. I was just coaching my peers, helping people get up to speed, taking some responsibility for them. And I think that step-by-step approach is very good because you get some skills. You also get to find out whether that reflects and you like that kind of activity. So very much, find opportunities, an intern or somebody more junior in the company that you can provide informal support to. But I also valued, as I mentioned, Mars was a fantastic company to invest in its employees. So I had formal training. I went to courses. I spent time learning about the theory and the practice of management and motivating people. And having that formal training is definitely very supportive as well. I think it's worthwhile to do both. Just practicing by yourself, what's the best practices? You don't know.
That's the one thing I never did. I never went to a leadership course. It's just I got jumped into it because I opened my own business, right? Although I had very senior leadership positions in the corporate world before I started on my own, but I never got formal training. So back in 2012, I realized that I needed a lot of learning and I didn't know where to turn. So I actually took a year off and went and did a course, a whole year course just on leadership training specifically for IT people. And it changed my life because
that's such a good investment for you.
I learned about culture and about motivation, about leadership versus management. And all my teachers were like all the people that. So I had a main professor, but most of the courses were given by global CIOs, by people that are in the field and they are great leaders in technology. So the perspectives that I got, it was amazing. The time when I came back to my business, everybody started really liking my leadership style because it completely changed.
I think that was a great investment. One of my biggest learnings, I went on a culture program. So when I was growing up, it was very much different countries. And when you went to work, I worked in the UK, and pretty much everybody I worked with was born in the UK. And then we were going through this globalization, and so we became a pan-European organization. So suddenly I was working with people from France, Germany, Holland, other countries. And the countries have very different styles. And without some support and training, I think we all struggled to really work out how best to operate together. So that cultural training was a revelation for me. It really helped me to really understand, work better together with multiple different cultures.
That's wonderful. Paul, what has been the hardest problem that you ever encountered, and how do you overcome it?
I think change, honestly, is ultimately the biggest challenge that you face in a leadership role, because no company is going to survive if it stays the same. It has to evolve. And if you look at our roles, like running IT, we're probably at the leading edge of that. The ability to use technology on ourselves or to provide new technology to the business is something that changes very rapidly. And yet, people don't necessarily feel comfortable embracing change, different ways of working. They've been successful with how they've operated, and you're trying to do something different. And so I think that is one of the biggest challenges, is how to help people embrace and be motivated to change and to embrace new ways of working. Honestly, they fail sometimes. Like if you're taking risks, you're trying to do something more innovative, you have to accept failure. And the ability to help people through that, like I tried to do this and I failed, that's a big setback for many people. And yet they learned something, and then they have to try again and hopefully be successful this time. But I do think that supporting change is quite challenging. People fear change because they know that they've been successful in the ways that they used to work.
Paul, one of the things that I learned, I'm a man of faith, so I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I'm saying that in a technology podcast because a lot of people that get stuck in life is because they are so afraid of change.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because they don't have faith. Starting faith in themselves, or faith that this change could lead them to the next position forward, right? And going back to the management, leadership, and developing people, a lot of the guys that stay coding, they end up miserable because they were meant to be leaders but never took that leap of faith. They never believed that they could actually do it, but then they got frustrated, right?
Absolutely. I think there's risks and challenges and setbacks. but ultimately the benefits are worth it and worth the investment. I look at myself, like I was born, grew up in the UK. I decided I wanted to live somewhere else. I came to the US. I wouldn't say it was super amazingly successful on day one. It was a big cultural change. I'd been CIO in the UK, and then I came here thinking, wow, it'll be great. It's like, actually, there's some things I have to learn and some things that are different. And so, probably a little bit of a setback for me as a leader in terms of making that transition. But now I'm much bigger, but much stronger, and I have learned so much having taken that risk, having gone through that learning exercise. And I think for whatever you do in life, if you don't challenge yourself, you're not going to take the steps forward, and you're not going to be able to look back at your career and go, whoa, that was a bit hard, but look at what I achieved. I think you do have to take some risks, and if they go wrong, they go wrong. You lick your wounds and you pick yourself up and try again.
It's exactly right. And my dad always told me, take the risk, but manage it. So evaluate what could happen. And if whatever it is that could happen, you could recover from it, what's the worst? If the worst that could happen is that you could recover eventually from it, go take the risk if you want it that much.
That's great advice. I think that's good advice. You got to think about the downside so that at least you have some awareness of it. But don't let it scare you, because if it happens, you'll find a way forward.
And another thing that has happened in my life is that 90% of the stuff that I worry about never happens. Has that happened to you too?
Yeah, I think you worry about a lot of things. Sometimes they happen, and you get over them. But by the time you look back at them, they're not as bad as when you're looking forward at them. I think that's the thing that you have to remember. It's horrible when you look forward, oh gosh, this terrible thing might happen. And it does happen. But then 6 months later or a year later, you look back at it, you think, oh gosh, I got over it. It wasn't great, but I survived. So, when you're looking backwards at problems, they're not as big as when you look forward.
Why is it that when you look back, you're like, oh, wow, I did that? It's because it makes you grow.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Failures are the only way to grow, and people don't get it, right?
Yeah.
That's why I love this. When the whole startup community started to grow in the mid-2000s and forward, I got right into it because, I had a company and I could we built a lot of startups over for our clients. But I love the culture because the idea was fail forward. So they already had failure in their equation, not because they wanted to fail on purpose. They wanted to avoid failure, but for them is I better fail fast so that my cost of the failure is minimum, so I can pivot and gain success much faster. And it's like, that's the way you should live life.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I think that's a great advice. And I think one of the things I've seen, like I've worked in multiple countries, is in the US, that there's more risk taking, more failure, and more success.
Yeah. Yes. And it's that mentality, right? And now you got it, because it's once you're an immigrant like I am. I was born in Guatemala, moved to Canada when I was 19 years old. Completely culture shock, just like you, because American culture and UK culture, they couldn't be more different.
Yeah, quite different.
So I know what you went through, and that alone will give you so much growth that very little things will scare you, right? It's that leap of faith that you say, like, I'm going to make it work,
Yeah, once you're here, you make it work. And I think it really develops you, the cultural understanding, how people think, behave. It's just mind expanding. Like, it's different. Like, wow, these people think differently to me. I need to understand it and then take good value from it. So I think that's what's helped as you embrace these different cultures. It expands your mind.
Paul, that I have had many friends that were also immigrants. Canada is built by immigrants. We have I remember in 2003, that company that I was leading the team, anytime you went to the cafeteria for lunch, it was about 2,000 people, employees. But so at any time there were like 500 people having lunch, 22 countries represented. In 2003.
That's pretty good.
But some of the guys that I met, some of the people that I met that came from another country, their idea was, I'll come to Canada, I'll make enough money, and then I'll go back home and I'll enjoy, because usually back home is cheaper, right?
Yep.
You know that 4 out of 5 come back to Canada?
Mm-hmm.
So they actually do it. Talk about risk, right? They sell everything. They make, they have $1-2 million. They go back home saying, I'm a millionaire in my country. This is 10x the money. In 2 years, they're back into Canada.
Well, my early days, I thought I'd come for a few years and I'd go back to England. And I've been here nearly 20 years now. And yeah, no thoughts that we'll go back. Once you get settled, I might go somewhere different. I could go to Asia. I haven't done that. But yeah, I don't think retracing the steps is really that easy.
Right. So you know what I do now? Because you always have nostalgia with, you always want to go back to your country. Like you were born there, you met everybody there, your family is probably there. What I have been doing the last 2-3 years is, instead of just moving back, I just go back for a couple of months. Since I can work remotely, just go 2-3 months, take that out of my system and come back to my beautiful country.
That's a good plan. Yeah, I'm lucky that the last 2 companies I worked for had a big office in London, and so I get back once or twice a year, and I get to see all my friends and get my nice English food, and then I'm done and I come back here.
And there is nothing more for me nicer than being in a London pub after work and having all the people there having a drink right after work. That was when I was there. That was amazing. That was great. I remember though, the first time I went to a pub in London, nobody came to ask me what I wanted to drink. Then I realized you actually have to go to the counter and ask for your drink.
Oh yeah, you need to go to the bar.
Paul, can't believe it. Almost 40 minutes have gone by, and I want to respect your time. I know you're a big C executive. So I'll ask you one last question before we finish. If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write on it?
Whoa. I think I'll reflect our discussion. I think it's embrace change, look to the future.
Embrace change, for sure. Change is inevitable.
Yeah.
The only thing that stays constant, I always tell my team, is change.
Mm-hmm.
The only constant in life is change.
Yeah, and I think if you can do that, for each individual is different, but allow you and your company to move forward, be successful, and then look backwards at, wow, I got through all those what I thought were difficult times. That's the reward.
Thank you so much, Paul. That's completely true. Especially for the newer generations. For us, it took a little bit, right? I remember like 80s and the beginning of the 90s, computing was pretty much the same, but then mid-90s forward, it just accelerated. If you look at people in the past, like from the 1900s, 1800s backwards, like how long did human beings stay on horses? Like all the way up to the 1900s.
Change is accelerating dramatically, and technology is leading it. Gen AI at the moment, is definitely the biggest innovator. I think even for technologists, if you look at technology and how fast it's moving, like, can we envisage what we can do in 5 years' time? I have some ideas, but honestly, I think if in 5 years' time, I'll be surprised at what we can do.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be very tough if you resist change. To your point, embrace change, right?
Yeah, I absolutely. I kicked off a training program. We're just introducing Gen AI for all of the company, and I said to them, and I think it's really true. In 2 years, if you are not effectively using Gen AI to support your work, you're obsolete.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like the people that are going to be successful in the future are the people that understand whatever the technology at the time is that supports people going forward and embraces it and takes advantage of it.
That's for sure. Paul, thank you so much for your time. God bless you. If people like to follow you or ask you more questions, are you on LinkedIn?
Yep, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, CIO at Mimecast. I think I'm pretty easy to find. Happy to have them reach out and talk to them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. God bless you, and I'll see you around.
David, it's great chatting. Good to speak to you again.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.